the question that you're asking now is like, what is trauma? When we speak about being trauma informed, what do you mean by trauma? And we can look at trauma from a few different perspectives. I mean, often we think about trauma as a physical impact trauma, and that's one kind of trauma. And we also have psychological trauma. There's similarities between the two. When we think about an impact trauma, let's say, you're on your bike and you have an accident and you hurt something, you hit the ground and it hurts your shoulder. So we have this wave of energy that hits our body, and our body can absorb some of it, but when it gets overwhelmed and it can no longer take and absorb and integrate and process the energy, then there's a rupture that happens. Our system becomes overwhelmed and we have rupture. We have rupture in the tissues, we have disorganization in the joints and the nerves, and we start to have, lesions and injury. That is physical trauma. It's similar to emotional trauma, because if we think about, when there's a big energy coming at us, say someone is really aggressive with us, we can absorb that to a certain degree, depending on our health and capacity for that. If we get overwhelmed and our system is unable to integrate that, there starts to become a rupture and a disorganization, not in the physical tissues, but in the neural networks within our nervous system. And that becomes something that's sort of held and stored in the body that we need to heal before we can sort of regain our capacity. So there's similarities between that physical impact trauma and that psychology overwhelm trauma. So when we talk about being trauma informed, it has a lot to do with understanding how the nervous system responds to trauma. This is a course that focuses on that psychological aspect and about the physiological the neurophysiology of that kind of trauma and how it impacts our healing from both the physical and emotional trauma. And you might have actually picked up on this, but they often do go together very much too, right? Like, let's say that car accident or that bike accident, they hit the ground. There's a huge overwhelm for their emotions in that as well. And we call that incident psychological trauma. There's that fear, that survival mechanism that goes through their nervous system, that they're like, oh my God, I was going to die, and then I survived, and there's still all that to process from that incident. So it is really helpful to understand what's happening, not just for the tissues, but also for the nervous system as we look to heal that trauma.